In July of 2012, a man named Michel Gauvreau climbed a stack of barrels inside a giant warehouse in Quebec, Canada. His job was simple: count the barrels, make sure the numbers matched the records. The warehouse held maple syrup, thousands and thousands of barrels of it. Each full barrel weighed about 620 pounds. That is heavier than a refrigerator, much heavier. These barrels did not move. They just sat there, stacked high, full of sweet amber syrup worth a fortune. So when Gauvreau put his weight on one of the barrels, he expected it to be solid as a rock. Instead, it wobbled. He stopped. That was wrong. A full barrel of syrup does not wobble. He knocked on the side of it. Instead of a dull thud, he heard a hollow echo, like banging on an empty drum. He opened it up. The barrel was empty. He checked another one. Empty. He checked a third. This one was full, but not with syrup. It was full of water. Michel Gauvreau had just stumbled onto one of the strangest burglaries in history. Over many months, thieves had quietly drained millions of dollars worth of maple syrup from this warehouse, one barrel at a time, and almost nobody had noticed. You are listening to Wait That Actually Happened, the podcast where we prove history is stranger than fiction. I'm your host, author Daniel P. Douglas, and today we are heading to Quebec for a crime that sounds made up but is completely real. This is the story of the great Canadian maple syrup heist. It has a secret reserve most people never knew existed. It has a gang of thieves with trucks and hoses. It has $18 million worth of syrup vanishing into thin air. And yes, it really happened. So grab a stack of pancakes and settle in. To understand this heist, you first need to know one wild fact. Canada has a strategic reserve of maple syrup. You have probably heard of the Strategic Oil Reserve. Countries keep huge stores of oil tucked away in case of an emergency. Well, the province of Quebec does the same thing with maple syrup. Here is why. Quebec is the maple syrup capital of the world. The province makes about 70% of all the maple syrup on Earth. That is a giant chunk of a global business. So a group called the Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers decided to take control of the whole thing. The Federation works almost like a club that every syrup farmer has to join. It sets the price of syrup. It tells farmers how much they are allowed to sell each year. Some people even called it a syrup cartel, like an oil cartel, but for breakfast food. Now, maple trees do not cooperate with this plan. Some years they make tons of syrup. Other years they barely make any. It all depends on the weather. So the Federation built a strategic reserve. In good years, they store the extra syrup. In bad years, they release it. This keeps the price steady and stops the market from going crazy. By 2011, they had so much extra syrup that they needed more space, so they rented a big red brick warehouse in a small town called St. Louis de Blanford. It sits right next to a highway, about 2 hours from Montreal. And here is the part that made the whole thing possible. That warehouse had almost no security, no cameras, no alarms. The syrup sat in plain white barrels that looked like every other barrel, and the barrels were only checked once a year. Picture it. A building stuffed with tens of millions of dollars worth of product, barely a lock on the door, checked once every 12 months. To a thief, that is not a warehouse, that is an invitation. The plan was simple, patient, and very sneaky. Some of the thieves were insiders. They knew the syrup business, they knew how the reserve worked, and they figured out something clever. If the syrup was only checked once a year, then they had a whole year to work without getting caught. So they rented space in a building right near the reserve. Then they got to work. At first, the plan went like this. They would load full barrels of syrup onto trucks. They would drive the barrels to a quiet sugar shack out in the country. A sugar shack is a small cabin where farmers usually boil sap into syrup, but this one was used for stealing. At the shack, they used hoses to siphon the syrup out of the barrels. Then they refilled the empty barrels with water and trucked them right back to the warehouse. From the outside, nothing looked different. A barrel full of water sat in the exact same spot as before. But this method took forever. driving barrels back and forth, draining them, filling them with water, driving them back. It was slow. So the thieves got bolder. They started siphoning the syrup straight from the barrels right there in the reserve. Sometimes they did not even bother refilling them with water. They just left them empty and hoped nobody would notice. For months, this worked perfectly. The stolen syrup was loaded up and shipped out. The thieves sold it in small batches to buyers in other parts of Canada and in the United States. Most of those buyers had no idea they were buying stolen goods. To them, it was just a great deal on syrup. By the time it was over, the gang had drained close to 9,500 barrels. That added up to about 3,000 tons of maple syrup. The total value was around $18 million. That is not a typo. $18 million of breakfast syrup gone. And then Michel Gauvreau climbed up to count the barrels, felt one wobble, and the whole sweet scheme came crashing down. When the Federation realized what had happened, they called the provincial police, known as the Sûreté du Québec. This turned into the biggest investigation in that police force's history. Officers interviewed more than 300 people. They got 40 search warrants. They chased the trail of stolen syrup across provinces and across the border into the United States. They even used a clever trick to track the syrup. Maple syrup glows a little under special light, and the glow is slightly different from batch to batch. It is almost like a fingerprint. Police used this to match stolen syrup to the reserve, even after it had been sold and moved around. Slowly, the case came together. The police figured out it was an inside job. The thieves had used their knowledge of the business to pull it off. In the end, police arrested 26 people. 4 of them were convicted in court. The man called the ringleader was named Richard Valliere. He was found guilty of theft, fraud, and trafficking stolen goods. He got a sentence of about 8 years in prison. On top of that, the court hit him with a fine of around $9 million. If he could not pay it, he would face even more time behind bars. His father, Raymond Valliere, was also convicted. So was a syrup dealer from New Brunswick named Etienne Saint-Pierre, and so was a man named Avec Caron, who was connected to the warehouse and who police say helped come up with the idea in the first place. But here is the part that makes this story so good. More than a dozen people are believed to have taken part in the heist. Truck drivers, syrup dealers, sugar shack workers, a whole team, and most of them were never caught. They simply slipped away and disappeared. Some of the stolen syrup was recovered, but thousands of barrels were never found. That syrup is long gone, probably eaten on pancakes and waffles by people who never knew the dark secret behind their breakfast. As for the reserve itself, the Federation learned its lesson. They built a brand new high-tech storage center in another town. This one has cameras, alarms, and special codes to get inside. People started calling it the Fortress of Maple Syrup. It only took a burglary to teach them that liquid gold needs a lock on the door. The maple syrup heist is a reminder of a funny truth. The world is full of valuable things hiding in plain sight, and we often forget to protect them. Most people never imagine that breakfast syrup could be worth millions. It does not look like gold or diamonds. It looks like, well, syrup. And that is exactly why the warehouse had no cameras. Nobody believed anyone would bother to steal it. But value is value. If something can be sold, someone will try to take it. History is full of thieves who went after strange treasures. Cheese has been stolen by the truckload. So have nuts, like almonds and pistachios. There have even been big thefts of laundry detergent because it is easy to resell and hard to trace. We tend to guard the things that look expensive and ignore the things that quietly are. A warehouse of syrup, a field of avocados, a truck full of coffee beans. To a thief who has done the math, these are just money in a different shape. The lesson is simple. The most valuable thing in the room is not always the shiniest. Sometimes it is sitting in a plain white barrel stacked to the ceiling with nobody watching the door. So that is the Great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist. The time a gang of thieves quietly drained $18 million worth of syrup from a secret reserve, one barrel at a time, until a curious auditor climbed the wrong stack and felt it wobble. A few of them went to prison. The reserve got a fortress, and somewhere out there, more than a dozen people got away clean, sitting on a fortune in stolen syrup that the police never found. It is proof that you do not need guns or fancy gadgets to pull off a giant sticky up. Sometimes all you need is a truck, a hose, a lot of patience, and a warehouse that nobody thought to lock. So the next time you pour syrup on your pancakes, take a good look at it. That sweet amber liquid is worth more than you think. Just ask the people of Quebec, who learned the hard way that liquid gold needs guarding too. Be sure to check out my Substack, Intelligence Bulletin from author Daniel P. Douglas, for more podcast series, written articles, and links to my books. Subscribe to never miss history's weirdest moments. Until next time, remember, truth is stranger than fiction, and history is weirder than you think. Thanks for listening. Have a memorable day.